Hi class, and welcome to your very first screencast. So I'm sure that you're all really excited to start your study of biology. Now biology means the study of life. The prefix bio means life. And we're best to start with the study of life than just to simply ask, well, what is life? What is life made of? And really to answer that question, we have to look at chemistry and start looking at matter, because really all life is made of matter. Look around you. What you're sitting on, the chair, the table, your notebook, your pen, that is matter. Matter is simply anything that has mass and takes up space. So plants, trees, animals, the food you ate, that big juicy hamburger maybe you just got done eating for dinner, yourself, you are made of matter. So let's go ahead and focus in on that nice juicy hamburger maybe you just had for dinner, and let's zoom in on that and see what is really inside of that, because you know what, that is made up of living things. That beef was living, the vegetables on it are living. So let's see what life is made out of. Well, the answer is matter is made of atoms. Atoms are the smallest unit of matter. And the structure of an atom is actually quite simple. It has a center called a nucleus, and that is made up of protons, which are positively charged, and neutrons, which have no charge to them. So that's in the center, and that's the nucleus. Now, surrounding the nucleus, we have something called electrons. So this is another subatomic particle, and electrons have a negative charge to them. And we're going to look a little bit closer at electrons in just a second. So just imagine there are billions and billions of atoms inside of that hamburger that you just ate. But you might be asking, okay, yes, all those atoms are in there, but what's holding it all together? Maybe you had an egg for breakfast. I love to have eggs in the morning. And we have this beautiful eggshell. What's holding that eggshell together? What am I breaking when I break that eggshell? What about the yolk? What's holding the yolk together? What am I breaking when I heat up on the skillet that egg? So what holds matter together? And the answer is chemical bonds. Chemical bonds hold all matter together. So let's go back to this idea of the atom, because remember there are billions of atoms inside of that egg, and let's take a closer look at how these atoms sort of are bonded together through chemical bonds. Well, it's all about the electrons. The electrons are what is involved in the chemical bonds. So here's one atom, and let's bring in another atom, its little friend, okay? So you notice that the two electrons are wanting to be close together. They're forming that chemical bond. And the reason is that atoms want their outsides to be full of electrons. That's when they're most happy. They're full and happy of electrons. So they can do some things in order to be full of electrons. They can either share with another atom, they can give some electrons away, or they can take electrons from another atom. So let's first look at this scenario of when they're being shared. Okay, so here we have, this is actually methane, CH4, and carbon is sharing its 4 electrons, 1, 2, 3, 4, with 4 different hydrogens. So here are the electrons from hydrogen. So carbon is happy and hydrogen is happy. They're both sharing the electrons. This is called a covalent bond. It's a very, very strong bond. And these types of bonds, covalent bonds, actually hold together most molecules of life. Okay, let's take a look at another scenario, which is, remember, they want to be full of electrons, so they can either share, give, or take. So let's take a look at what happens when they give some or take some away. In this example right here, this guy only has 1 measly electron on its outside. That's not really full. But here on the inside, there are 2 electrons, which is full. That makes it happy. So it wants to give this electron away in order for it to have this full inner shell of 2 electrons. And what happens is when it gives that electron away to this guy now actually becomes happy because it has 2, 4, 6, 8 electrons in its outer shell, which is actually the perfect number for that atom. It wants to be happy. It wants to have 8. So this guy is giving it away, this guy is taking it, and they're both happy. They're not sharing it. This is called an ionic bond, when there's a transfer of an electron. It's a little bit weaker than a covalent bond, and what we're actually looking at here is table salt. Okay, sodium chloride is an example of an ionic bond. Sodium is going to give away an electron to chlorine. You eat this every day. This is an example of an ionic bond, an ionic compound. And what is formed from the result of an ionic bond, from that transfer of electrons, is something called an ion. So an ion is simply an atom with an electrical charge. So it's either a positive ion or it's a negative ion. So let's take a closer look at how these ions are formed. So here we have sodium and we have fluorine. Notice sodium in its outer electron, or in its outer shell, only has one electron. That doesn't make it happy, right? It wants a full outside. So it's going to give that one away, and it's going to be left with a full shell. Fluorine is not so happy. It only has 7 electrons, but it wants 8. So it's going to take it from sodium. So here sodium is giving that electron to fluorine. Now fluorine has 8. It is happy. And so now we call this a positive ion and a negative ion. It's positive because it gave away a negative charge and it was left with a positive charge. Fluorine is negative because it gained this electron right here. It gained that electron, and so now it has a negative charge to it. So that's ionic bonding. Here's your checkpoint. Now you might be wondering, we're talking about chemistry. The only thing I really know about chemistry is this periodic table of elements. So what's an element? Where does an element fit into this? I thought that I needed certain elements to survive, right? Like oxygen. Well, you're absolutely right. An element is simply a substance that cannot be broken down to any other type of substance. So let's figure out how atoms, elements, and matter all fit together. So let's take a look at an example. The best example to look at with biology is carbon, because all life on Earth is carbon-based. Most of your body is actually carbon. Carbon comes in many really cool forms. Diamond is a type of carbon. Graphite, lead in your pencil, that's carbon. And so here is an atom of carbon. All carbon atoms have a nucleus of 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and an outside of 6 electrons. So the key here is that atoms make up elements, and each element is composed of millions of the same type of atom. So this little hunk of carbon has millions and billions of these exact same types of atoms, a carbon atom. So atoms make up elements. Now, why should you care about elements? Well, you definitely should care about elements because life requires 25 essential elements. And there are 6 most abundant, this should say 6. There are 6 most abundant elements, and I call them chnops. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur, chnops. And you consume these all day, every day. These are the 6 most essential elements that you find in proteins that you eat, in carbohydrates, in fats and lipids, and especially in your DNA that makes you who you are. You find carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Okay, now there are other elements that are required, but they're only required in small amounts, so we call them trace elements because they're required in small amounts. So some examples of trace elements: boron, copper, fluorine, iron, and iron is actually something you often see fortified like in cereals, so you look for that on your nutrition label. Iodine is another one. Go to your cabinet and get out your salt. You will find that your mom or dad probably has bought iodized salt. Iodine is often added to salt because we do need a little bit of iodine, and if we don't get it, we could form a goiter. That's because of our thyroid hormones and the requirement of iodine in that hormone. So lack of iodine can cause goiters. Here's another checkpoint. Okay, your homework assignment. So when you turn in your video notes, you're also going to turn in this assignment. Research and be ready to explain an important ion in the human body. So we just learned about ions. And second, bring in a nutritional label from a food that you commonly eat. And you can either cut it out or you can bring in the whole box if you need to. But in class, we're going to take a look at both ions and how they're important in the body. And we're going to take a look at what you're actually eating and what is on that nutrition label.